Welcome to The Explainer. All right, let's talk about a phrase you hear all the time these days, the deep state. It's thrown around to suggest there's this secret power, pulling the strings behind the scenes. But what is it really? We're going to unpack the whole thing, the theory, where it came from, and the impact it's having.
Okay, so here's how we're going to break this all down. First, we'll nail down what the theory actually is. Then we'll look at the real government secrets that kind of gave it a grain of truth. After that, we'll trace its pretty surprising origins back to Turkey, see how it just exploded in America, and then we'll compare the conspiracy theory to the actual reality of how government works. Finally, we'll get into the real-world consequences of it all.
All right, first things first. When you hear someone talk about the deep state, what are they actually trying to say? At its heart, the theory is this. The people you elect, like the president or members of Congress, aren't really in charge. The real power, so the theory goes, is held by a hidden network of career bureaucrats, unelected people in places like the CIA, the FBI, and other agencies. And they're supposedly running the country based on their own agenda, no matter who you vote for. Now, here's where it gets really interesting. This whole idea didn't just pop up out of thin air. No, it actually grew from a seed of very legitimate, very real historical distrust, planted by decades of actual government secrecy. I mean, look at this timeline. It shows exactly why people became so skeptical. In the 60s and 70s, you had this 1-2 punch of shocking revelations. First, the Pentagon Papers proved officials had been lying for years about the Vietnam War. Then, the Watergate scandal. And on top of that, investigations uncovered that the FBI and CIA were illegally spying on American citizens. Of course, people started to believe the government had a secret hidden side. These events created a genuine mistrust that has lasted for generations.
But here's a twist you might not see coming. The actual term deep state, well, it wasn't even invented in the United States. Its origins are somewhere else entirely. Yup, you heard that right. The phrase comes from Turkey back in the 1990s. And over there, it was used to describe something that was very real. A secret network inside the government that connected parts of the military, intelligence agencies, and even organized crime.
Okay, this is probably the most important distinction to understand. The Turkish deep state was a documented reality. We're talking official investigations, arrests, actual trials that proved links to assassinations and crime syndicates. The American version, on the other hand, is an unproven allegation. It's a theory about a coordinated plot that spread mostly through media and online, but it doesn't have that same backing of hard evidence or formal investigations.
So, if it started in Turkey, how in the world did it become a household name in American politics?
Well, things really took off in 2017. President Trump and his supporters started using the term all the time, claiming that career government officials were leaking information to sabotage his presidency. This tweet from early 2017 was one of the key moments that blasted the term into the mainstream for millions of people. And from there, it just caught fire. First, it was amplified constantly on conservative media, which made it a regular part of the political conversation. Then, the idea got absorbed into the much bigger, much more extreme QAnon conspiracy theory. QAnon essentially took the deep state idea and supercharged it with its own wild claims about a global cabal and a secret war. And to give you a sense of just how far these ideas traveled, get this, by 2020, a survey found that 17% of Americans believed in a core part of the QAnon narrative, which heavily features the deep state. That's a huge number, and it just shows how much the idea of a secret cabal had really taken root. Okay, so let's hit pause on the theories for a minute and look at the actual evidence. It's really important to draw a line between what researchers see as just normal, everyday government function and what the theory claims is this big, active conspiracy. So the theory paints this picture of a secret plot, right? But the reality is, well, it's a lot more complicated. Federal workers have civil service protections, which means they can't just be fired for disagreeing with a policy. What the theory calls a conspiracy leak might actually be a legally protected act of whistleblowing. And the idea that this bureaucracy is all-powerful, the president actually holds a ton of power over them through budgets and appointments. This really brings us to the million-dollar question, doesn't it? Have researchers and journalists found any hard evidence of some centrally organized, coordinated resistance network inside the government? And the answer, after a lot of digging, is no, they haven't. Instead of finding some secret organization with a command structure,
investigators found that leaks were coming from separate individuals in different agencies who were often acting on their own. They might have been angry or felt they had a duty to uphold the law, but there's just no proof of some secret, organized plot.
And look, this isn't just some harmless argument you see on the internet. Believing in a deep state has some very serious, very real-world consequences for our politics and our society as a whole. The biggest impact by far is this deep erosion of trust. When a huge chunk of the population believes that institutions like the FBI or the courts are corrupt and part of a conspiracy, it pours gasoline on political polarization. It leads to the demonization of public servants and experts, and it distracts everyone from having real conversations about the reforms our government actually needs. What this really does at the end of the day is it changes the rules of the game. It reframes any and every policy disagreement as something sinister. It's no longer just a difference of opinion. It's seen as an act of treason. Everything becomes a battle of good versus evil, and there's just no room left for compromise or even basic discussion.
And so this leaves all of us with a really tough question. When healthy skepticism of government sours into full-blown paranoia, how do we even begin the hard work of having honest conversations about fixing our institutions? It's a challenge that gets to the very heart of how a democracy is supposed to work.